Hello and welcome, my name is Daniel, and in this tutorial I want to show you my Fast City plugin for Cinema 4D. First of all, you have to install the City plugin into your plugins folder of Cinema 4D, and once you have restarted Cinema 4D again, you will find the Fast City plugin in the extensions menu, and then you can simply dock this Fast City dialog into your Cinema 4D layout. And first of all, you want to create a new city with the Generate City button, and then you will have this first procedural city layout inside your viewport. And as you can see here, we have the city root and everything gets sorted underneath this city root here. And I simply want to show you the general settings first. We have the solve attempts. This means how many attempts gets the solver to figure out your city layout configuration. This will work very well with simple layouts, but later if you have bigger grids or more complex spline boundary modes and generate river configurations inside your layout, you will need to increase the solve attempts so the solver has more attempts to figure out a solution for your city configuration. Then we have the random seed here. With the random seed, you will always get the same layout if you hit the Generate City button, and if you hit Generate a New, you will get a new variation and the random seed will be increased. So let's set it back to 301 and generate a city, and we will have the same layout. This is for consistency, so if you have a seed which you like, you will always get the same layout with the seed, but also you have to set up the correct configuration for your tiles distribution, of course. And one thing I have to mention, if you generate a city or hit reevaluate asset, all the settings will be saved inside your document. If you hit Generate City and then save this file, you will always have the settings. So it will save the settings for you. But if you don't want to have the settings anymore, you can simply reset it to defaults. So very nice, it keeps all your settings. You don't have to worry about your settings. You don't have to write them down on a paper. It always keeps your settings inside the file. Then we have the tile size. You can change the tile size, of course, for the tiles, maybe 50 centimeters, then generate a new city, and as you can see, the layout is smaller. And you can do that for a tile size of 1 to unlimited. But if you use your custom assets, you have to consider, or you have to figure out your tile size in advance, because your custom assets will not be scaled with the tile size value. Only our procedural assets will be scaled with the tile size, of course. So set up the tile size first and then put in your custom assets if you have figured out the tile size or the edge length of your tiles for your custom assets. Then we have the grid X and grid Z settings, of course, so you can simply specify how many tiles you want to have for the different directions. And then we have the spline boundary mode. you can enable this mode, and then you can simply put in any spline of Cinema 4D which is closed, of course, so we can generate the city within the boundaries of the spline. And you have to make sure the spline is aligned to the grid, which is X set in this case, and maybe we want to increase this a little bit. We drag and drop the spline into this boundary spline field here, then we hit generate, and now the city solver generates the city within the spline boundaries. You can also copy the spline here and then connect the splines and put it in, and then the city solver also can generate your city within spline boundary segments. And it's also possible to work with spline masks. So let's search for a spline mask here. And first of all, I want to clear the city again. And then we create a circle again, put it underneath the spline mask and copy the circle. And let's subtract them. And of course, we have to set the correct axis mode, which is X set in this case. And let's maybe scale them a little bit. Okay, something like that. And move them. And then we drag and drop in our spline mask here. And we can simply generate our city within the boundaries of this spline mask, which is also very nice. And you can go more crazy. You can simply copy the spline mask, put it here, and maybe copy again, put it here. Then search for a connect object, something like that. Put all the spline masks underneath the connect object, put the connect object in, and then the city solvers figures out a solution for that, of course. Very nice, and it's a very powerful mode to create your own city layouts. Okay, let's disable the setting and set the grid size back maybe to 20. And let's take a look to the density distribution rates. Here you can simply put in your numbers for the specific tiles. So this is a percentage value, so you have 70% buildings in this case and 10% parks, and then of course your street configuration. So if we put in 0 for all the streets, then we only get 70% buildings and 10% parks, and the solver figures out and fills in the tiles. So if we put in 70 and then 30, then we have 100. So we have now perfectly generated 70% buildings and 30% parks in this case. So if we put in 50, 50, we have 50% buildings and 50% parks. And then of course you can dial in your streets. If you put only in one, you can get a street maybe in this case, but in the other case you will not have a street. So you need to increase this a little bit more, maybe something to 10 or 20, then generate again, and you will always get some straight streets in your city layout. And then you can put in some lower values for curves and T-junctions, and now you will have a final city layout, maybe parks only 10 in this case. So it looks plausible, very nice. And as you can see, we have these blue buildings here and yellow and orange buildings. Blue buildings are the normal generic buildings, and then yellow and orange are our block buildings for straights and orange for corner. And you can put in your custom assets for them. But if you don't want to work with block buildings, you can also put in your normal buildings inside this target fields. And then if you want to rotate them, you can simply enable this 90-degree steps button for block buildings. And if you hit reevaluate assets, the block buildings will get rotated. So you can simply work also with generic buildings for your city layout, or you can only work with generic buildings for your city layout. And if you don't want to have this anymore and you decide to bring back the block buildings again, you simply disable this and then reevaluate, and everything gets aligned perfectly. Very nice, very powerful. And let's take a look at the river configuration. You can enable this, then you have some default values. Simply keep this default values and hit generate, and then you will get a river within your layout. The solver always needs to find a solution for your river from one edge to the other edge of your city, so the river always goes completely through your whole city grid. And of course you can set up some custom assets for the river straits, curves and bridges. Of course, bridges will be automatically integrated into your layout, of course. So the solver figures out everything for you. Then we have generate traffic. You can enable this and you don't have to generate your city again. You can simply hit reevaluate traffic and then the cars will appear on the streets. And in this case, you will need more cars, so you can increase the density, maybe something like that. And now we have some more cars on the streets. Then we can simply click this play button here and the traffic sim starts. And we don't care about the timeline. The traffic sim runs forever once you have hit the play button. And we also don't care about the FPS settings, so you can simply increase or decrease the FPS settings of your project. It's a full traffic simulation, so we don't care about the FPS settings. But if you bake the traffic simulation, you should put in a correct number for your desired FPS, of course. Then you can increase the car speed or decrease the car speed, of course. And now, as you can see, the cars go faster or they go slower. Cars will figure out their own paths, of course, so we don't have splines here. They follow a path system and they also wait on crossings for other cars, so they don't collide with other cars. And if you don't like a car, you simply click this car and delete it. And that's it. Then we have the lane offset. So you can simply put in a bigger number here to move the cars further away from the center. So if you have a different street configuration, or you can move them more into the center, also possible. So let's set it back to 12 in this case. Then if we take a closer look to curves, maybe something like that. In this case, you can smooth the curve radius, of course, if you have a different curve configuration. So we have a smoother angle here, or if you put in 0, then you have a 90-degree angle and the car only flips. Whoops, like that. And maybe in this case, we need something like 25 or so. And always hit reevaluate, of course. So the setting gets applied. And now we have a smoother curve radius for the cars. Also very nice. And of course, you can set up your custom assets. And of course, your cars don't have to be the same lengths. You can have different lengths for your custom assets of the cars, and the server figures out the solution. And if you are ready to render, you simply bake your traffic simulation here with the Bake Traffic Sim to Frames button. And the whole traffic sim gets baked for your timeline setup. So in this case from 0 to 250. And now you can scrub through the timeline. And as you can see, the whole simulation is baked and every car has its keyframes for position and rotation. And if you don't like a car, you can simply delete it, of course. And if you hit reevaluate traffic again, the simulation starts again and all the keyframes are gone. So keep this in mind. And of course you can edit the city, so you can simply copy this tile here. Whoops, maybe something like that, and then another one. And maybe we want a T-junction here. And then hit reevaluate traffic, and now new cars will appear on your newly created custom city streets, of course. Also very nice. And this will also work for your buildings, of course. So if you copy a building or a park, this will also be reevaluated with this reevaluate assets button here. So if you have different degree angles or size distribution weights, which I will show you later if we have set up our custom assets, this will also work. Okay, and now I think it's time to set up some custom assets for our city layout. So the city, the fast city plugin comes with this little low poly assets pack for testing, which is already set up for you in the scene. Now I will do that manually. So I have my assets here, and as you can see, we simply group them under null objects, and then we group the different tiles also under null objects. So you can put in different assets within your tiles, so you don't have to bake it to one single mesh. You can work with null object groups, of course. So I simply put in my park variations here into the parks, and then as you can see here we have our cars. They have a different length here, trucks and different cars, and we simply put them into the custom cars field here. Then also the streets, the curve, crossroads, straights, our buildings, our block variations, block buildings. Then if we want to have a river, we can simply put in the river straights, the river curve and the bridge variations. And now we have our city layout here, and we don't want to generate our city again, so we can simply hit the reevaluate assets button, and now all our assets appear, but we have set up the wrong tile size, so we need 100 in this case, so we have to generate the city again, and now it looks plausible and our cars are there. So maybe I simply set the lane offset to 15 or 20, 18, maybe something like that. It's plausible. And then you will have your city layout with your custom assets. And of course you can build in some new assets and then reevaluate again. And the new assets will appear in your city layout. And let's take a look at the random rotation here. So we have the random rotation for our buildings. We can reevaluate that, and now all the generic buildings get randomly rotated. And we can do that also for the block buildings here. So if we hit this button, now the block buildings get randomly rotated. Also very nice. And if you don't want to work with the block buildings, of course you can simply put in your normal building variations into this fields here. Hit reevaluate, and now the block buildings are gone and your normal buildings will appear here and you are good to go. You simply enable the 90-degree steps and everything gets randomly rotated. Very nice. We also have this for the parks, of course, so you can simply enable this 90-degree steps for the parks and all the parks will rotate randomly. Also very nice. Then we have the size distribution. This is a setting to simply sort your buildings inside the layout. Maybe I set up a curve, preset curve, something like that, and then reevaluate again. And as you can see now, we have the smaller buildings on the edge or on the corner of our layout and bigger buildings more inside the layout. We can also move this curve, maybe something like that, reevaluate again. Then we have more smaller buildings here. Also very nice. And this is the size distribution is more for sorting the buildings. And then we have the density distribution curve here. We can set up this also. Let's reevaluate again. And maybe we change it to something like that. And as you can see, you have the buildings more inside the city, and around the city you will only find streets and parks. So also very powerful settings. You can go very crazy with this curves to create some fancy layouts, some fancy city layouts. So if you have big city layouts, maybe let's create a big city layout, 50 by 80, something like that. Generate a city. Then it will happen that your viewport gets slower because Cinema 4D can't handle so many object instances. And then you can simply bake your city to a mesh. And then you have this dialog, cars will not baked. You have to bake the traffic simulation, of course. And then your city will be baked to a mesh. And as you can see now, all the buildings are one mesh. All the streets are one single mesh. And all the parks are one single mesh. And of course your river. And your viewport is much faster now. As you can see here, it's very smooth. And so you can also simulate bigger traffic simulations, of course. Everything is much smoother. So it's also a very powerful setting. If you want to use it, you can use it. And of course, it also has an undo function. So we can simply reset the bake settings. And there we go. Now we have the tiles back again. So it's also with the undo function. So if you hit this button, you don't have to worry that you can undo this, of course. And we have also undo steps implemented for basically everything here. And of course, if you now generate the city and then save your scene, you will have the same setup again. So you don't have to put in your assets again. They will, of course, be kept and all your settings will be the same if you open up your scene again. And now I think that's it. That's the Fast City plugin for Cinema 4D. Thanks for watching this tutorial. See you soon and goodbye.